Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome back Max Richtman. He is the president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Good Sunday morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Let me begin with Speaker Paul Ryan, because when he announced this budget agreement, he also said that the next step in the process is dealing with entitlement reform and specifically Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. What does that mean specifically?
Well, the Speaker has been on a mission to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid for years. As Speaker, as Chairman of the House Budget Committee, as Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, it's been a goal of his for so many years. And, you know, I think he's going to make a run at it soon. It may be the last time he's Speaker. So I think we're going to see a lot of effort out of the White House and from this Speaker and in the Senate as well. You mentioned the comments the Speaker made right after the budget deal was announced December 22nd. Senator Rubio, very similar comments. This is the next shoe that's going to drop, and I hope we can talk about the president's budget because that puts it all in perspective.
Well, let's talk about the budget. What does that mean for Medicare and Social Security recipients?
Dramatic cuts in the programs that are so important to seniors, to all citizens. You know, I watched the Republican presidential primary debates. I think I watched them all. It was an ordeal, but I watched them all, I think. And there was one candidate who promised time and again that he wouldn't cut Social Security, wouldn't cut Medicare, wouldn't cut Medicaid, and that was Donald Trump. And I remember thinking, I wonder if he really even understands what these programs do, how important they are, how they impact families, seniors, younger people. And then we have a budget. This is the president's budget that was submitted last Monday. And all of those promises were empty promises because this budget will take a cleaver to the programs that are so important that seniors care about: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs.
But you heard from Bob Bixby a moment ago as we talked about a $20 trillion debt that continues to grow. And what's driving government spending, according to CBO, in addition to more spending for military, is Medicaid and the CHIP program, Social Security, Medicare, and interest on the debt. So if you buy the argument that we need to bring down the debt and the deficit, and if these are the areas where we're seeing the biggest growth in spending, how do you, to use the words of the OMB director, Mick Mulvaney, bend that curve and do so humanely?
Well, humanely, that's really the key. You know, I wish I could have been here. I was sitting outside watching Bob Bixby. Some of the things he said make sense. Some of them don't make sense. Social Security, it's not an entitlement. He said it's often referred to as an entitlement. It's an earned benefit. Every paycheck a worker receives has withholding for Social Security, FICA, Federal Insurance Contribution Act. And that money is dedicated to the Social Security program. And when beneficiaries reach retirement age, they're eligible for these programs. So he mentioned an interesting point that you can bring more revenue into the programs, into Social Security particularly. And he also mentioned looking at the cap on wages subject to the FICA tax.
Which is about $142,000 roughly?
It's less than that. It's about $130,000 a year. After that, no more FICA tax. Why? Why does it stop then? Why not look at either reinstituting it at some point? Congressman John Larson of Connecticut has a good bill that would keep the cap at the current rate. It changes a little bit every year, and start collecting payroll taxes at $400,000 in wages. Senator Sanders has a bill, a similar kind of bill, that begins collecting payroll tax at $200,000 or $250,000. You know, I made this point at a town hall meeting. We do a lot of town hall meetings around the country. There's a very famous and very good basketball player. I won't mention his name because last time I did, I got into a little trouble. He stops paying payroll tax halfway through the first quarter of the first game of the basketball season. The rest of that quarter, the rest of the game, the season, the championship, no more payroll tax. This doesn't make any sense.
Is it time to raise the retirement age, or at least the Social Security age, And is it also time to apply means testing?
Absolutely not. First of all, raising the retirement age is a cut in benefits. We shouldn't have any dispute about that.
But if you did it over a 30-year period...
We've already done that. You know, Bob Bixby said the Congress didn't anticipate the baby boomers retiring, didn't do anything. That is so wrong. In the early 1980s, we had the Greenspan Commission, bipartisan, Bob Dole, Senator Moynihan, Tip O'Neill, and they did anticipate what was going to happen. And now the trustees of Social Security say there won't be enough money to pay full benefits in 2034. And that needs to be addressed. We're not a group that has our heads in the sand. We know we need to deal with it. But back in the early 80s, we were talking about a 6-month window. And we don't want to get to that point again, but there were some, Congress did anticipate it. They made some changes. The Social Security program, which was going to not have enough money to pay full benefits in 6 months, was extended now till 2034. And one of those things was raising the retirement age. You know, it's already 67 for most people. It will be 67 for everybody in a few years. So it went from 65 to 67. You know, you and I can maybe, hopefully, be talking about this for many years, but there are people who are working in jobs where they cannot keep working after 66, after 67. And, you know, I often hear, well, people can work longer. Where are those jobs? Are there jobs for those people? I don't see them.
Our guest is Max Richtman. He is the president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, and the website is ncpssm.org. And we provided a link on our website at cspan.org. We're dividing our phone lines a little bit differently. If you are a recipient of Social Security or Medicare, we have one line for you and the second line for all others. Eric is joining us on the all others line from Milton, New York. Good morning.
Good morning. In addition to lifting the caps, isn't it possible to start taxing those people who make money from things other than payroll? For example, investors who make billions and billions of dollars, if we taxed them a little bit to pay into Social Security?
Thank you, sir.
Well, there are proposals that would look at earned income, investment income, and bring that into the program. I think we need to look at that. We need to be careful about it. One thing that's important to realize is I do believe that individuals that, if there are changes, pay more into Social Security, they should get a bump up in their benefits, because that's the beauty of the program. It does have a return that is in some ways related to how much a worker puts into the program. You know, I mentioned Congressman John Larson's bill. He's got, I think, over 100 co-sponsors. By just reinstituting the payroll tax at $400,000 of wages, you could bring in enough revenue to have the program solvent for the rest of this century. That's why it's called the Social Security 2100 Act. You could bring in enough revenue to raise the minimum benefit, not a lot, of about $70 a month. You could have a COLA, and I think your listeners know what a COLA is, cost of living adjustment, very important. It's inadequate. It does not keep up with the real cost of inflation. That could be addressed by just bringing in more revenue from those wage earners earning above $400,000 a year.
Our next call is Ernestine from Oak Hill, West Virginia. Good morning, a recipient of Social Security.
Yes, good morning to you all, and thank you for taking my call. I believe, like the speaker is saying, that Social Security should be raised, probably not significantly, but enough to improve the income. I'm also in healthcare, and I find that a lot of my Social Security people who are clients either have to make the decision now to pay the rent, buy food, etc. They cannot really live on what some of them are getting now.
Hey, Ernestine, can you stay on the line? Because I was going to bring up that issue as well, and I'd like to get your response as well, because according to CNBC, the average retiree has about $163,000 in savings. Clearly, if you're going to live 15 to 20 years, that's not a lot of money. Is that part of the problem, that people use Social Security as a pension plan, not as a supplement to their retirement?
Well, it is part of the problem. You know, we're not opposed to other investments. Social Security has been described many times as one leg of a three-legged stool, and one of the other legs is pensions and investments. But you know, pensions, defined benefit pensions, have largely disappeared, and Social Security is relied on more and more by more and more people. But you know, the caller, Ernestine, you raise a very good question and state it very well. I think Social Security is so important now. It's probably more important than it's ever been because of the wobbly other legs of that three-legged stool, that we need to pay attention to it. We need to reinforce it. We need to improve it. You know, the average benefit is about $1,400 a month. Can you imagine trying to live on $1,400 a month? You mentioned the average, CNBC said that personal savings are $150,000. Frankly, I don't believe it's that much. If you're in a nursing home for 1 year, most of that's gone. If you're in a nursing home for 2 years, it's all gone. And then what do you do? You have to rely on the Medicaid program. Mm-hmm. And the Medicaid program under this budget is cut by about $1.4 trillion over 10 years. And Medicaid isn't just for poor people. Medicaid pays for 62% of nursing home care. 62%. Who's in a nursing home? Older people, disabled, children. They're gonna suffer with a dramatic cut of that magnitude in the Medicaid program.
I'm going to go back to Ernestine. I want to get her reaction to this as well. Thanks for waiting.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I agree with the guest, and if Medicare and Social Security are cut, we probably will have more deaths. And is that what the Republicans want in this nation?
Your response?
Well, you know, I don't know if that's accurate or not. I do know that when the budget deal was agreed to on December 22nd, we felt that the next shoe that was going to drop was our program, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and now we've seen that come to fruition in a big way in the budget of the president has sent up to Congress.
For those listening on C-SPAN Radio, and by the way, this program is carried also on Sirius XM, the POTUS, channel 124, every Sunday, so we welcome those listeners as well. Or if you're watching on the BBC Parliament channel in Great Britain, our guest is Max Richtman. We're focusing on Social Security and Medicare. Rose in Nashville, Tennessee, a Social Security recipient. Good morning.
Good morning. It just infuriates me that most of these politicians are either lawyers or they've been in politics. They've never really worked full days, hard labor in their lives. Now, can you imagine a 70-year-old man climbing a telephone pole, or say about the hairdresser that's in her 60s standing on her feet all day? I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous what they're trying to do. And you're right, a lot of people depend on Social Security just to pay their rent or pay their utilities or buy food, and don't have other government programs available. And it's just, they've already robbed the Social Security fund. Our employers paid into that. We paid into that all of our working lives, and they've never figured into their equation the fact that there's a lot of people that have died. I have several family members that have died and never collected one dime of Social Security because they died when they were younger, and yet they paid in, and they borrowed. Congress borrowed from the Social Security fund to balance their other budgets or whatever, and never paid us back. There's an IOU in there, the way I understand it, and it just all infuriates me to no end.
Thank you, Rose. We'll get a response.
Well, that's a lot to respond to, but it's some very typical comments. Let me just talk about one of the myths, there are a lot of myths about Social Security, that it's broke, it's not true, that there's no money there, it's not true, that the money has been taken and will not be repaid. Social Security, remember I talked about what the 1983 amendments to Social Security did. It built up a trust fund. Contrary to what Mr. Bixby said, politicians did realize the baby boomers were coming, and a trust fund was built by virtue of more money being paid into the program than was paid out in benefits. Now there's about $2.8 trillion in the trust fund. It has grown. It will continue to grow for a few more years before that trust fund is drawn down. The interest on the bonds that are purchased with that money. The money is dedicated to Social Security. I was at a town hall meeting. I mentioned I do quite a few of those around the country. And at that point, there was $2.6 trillion in the trust fund. And I was trying to explain that this money, you wouldn't want to have that much money cash. You want it to earn interest. It's invested in government bonds, treasury bonds, not the best interest, but the safest investment possible. And I said, you wouldn't want to have $2.6 trillion under your mattress. And a man in the back said, yes, I would. But the point is, the money is invested in government bonds. It's rolled over almost every day, and it is available to pay beneficiaries. The other point I want to address is the disconnect that not all, but many members of Congress have with the reality of what these programs mean to real people. And it's hard to get that point across. When in a previous life, I was staff director of the Senate Aging Committee, and we were reauthorizing the Older Americans Act, which has programs like Meals on Wheels, which, by the way, is going to be negatively impacted by this budget. And there was a member of the Senate committee at that time that was not in favor of reauthorizing the Older Americans Act. We worked with some of his home state, home-delivered meal folks, and they invited him to get in a van and go with them one day to deliver meals. And when he saw the reaction of real people to having their only hot meal of that day delivered and having an opportunity to have some kind of interaction with a real person, he came back and supported the program. So we've got to figure out ways to, similar kinds of ways to connect politicians with these programs so they do understand what they mean, so they do understand what Social Security disability payments can mean to someone who is barely getting by, who cannot even get out of the house before they start cutting this program. Social Security disability cut by about $70 million in the president's budget. Meals on Wheels is negatively impacted by cuts in community development and social development block grant programs. A lot of these smaller programs aren't as high profile as Social Security and Medicare, but I wish the president would get in a van, take a couple hours off of a golfing weekend and deliver meals and see if he still wants to get a budget through that will negatively impact the ability for the Meals on Wheels programs.
Well, we know he listens to this program and this network. Our guest is Max Richtman. He's with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. And a couple of tweets. This is from Jan, who says, I know how to fix Medicare and Medicaid. Cut the budgets. And this from Roger. Social Security has become primary because the Federal Reserve has destroyed any savings incentive. When this market bubble bursts, Social Security will be the only leg left. Another comment from Tillman 40. You should ask why the average nursing home costs $14,000 per month. Asking rhetorically, who can afford that? And finally from Parkstorm, stop giving all that money to the Pentagon and fund Social Security. Problem solved. We'll go to Cy in Plainview, New York, a Social Security recipient. Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I agree that coming after Social Security, he did state that. He's a hypocrite because his family benefited from Social Security benefits after his father died.
Cy, we lost you a moment. I know you're on a cell phone. You were referring to House Speaker Paul Ryan, correct? Just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
He benefited from Social Security himself after his father died. Also, Social Security is an entitlement, so are the pensions that the government receives. They should means test them if they're going to means test everyone else.
2 points on the table.
Well, it is true that Speaker Ryan received survivor benefits. I know members of Congress that have been in that situation. It had a different impact on them. They're champions of Social Security. Congressman Richie Neal of Massachusetts, who's the ranking Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee, I've heard him speak from the heart about how Social Security kept his family together when they needed the survivor benefits. A lot of people, I mentioned myths about Social Security. One of the myths is it's just for older people. That's not right. FICA, the term FICA, Federal Insurance Contribution Act, it funds old age survivor and disability programs. A third of Social Security benefits go to non-retired workers, survivors like Paul Ryan, Speaker Ryan, spouses, children. About 4 million children get by in life because Social Security is there for them, and they have a parent who became disabled or died young. It's insurance for families, and a lot of people don't really appreciate that.
Let's go to Diana joining us from Portland, Oregon. Good morning. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. I'm a recipient of Social Security and Medicare, and I raised 3 children by myself, and I get $750 a month. Okay, there was no money to put away for retirement. There's nowhere for me to go. If I go back and try to get back into a nursing home, there's no place to go. Try to find some rent. It's at least $1,000 a month. That's more money than I have.
Diana, how old are you?
I'm 63.
We'll get a response. Thank you.
Well, she's not alone. The average benefit is higher. It's I think $1,300 or $1,400 a month, but that means there are a lot of people in her situation who are receiving $700, $600, $800 a month. It is very difficult to live on that amount of money, and of course your Medicare premiums are taken out of that. And let me mention Medicare. We talked about Speaker Ryan and Social Security. He was a survivor and received survivor benefits. Part of his mission has been to privatize the Medicare program. He calls it, they call it vouchers, premium support. Instead of traditional Medicare, we would end up on under the Speaker's plan, which again he has championed for many years. A Medicare beneficiary would get a voucher and would be told, take this, instead of getting your traditional Medicare, use this voucher and go out and buy health care. Well, has he forgotten the reason we have the Medicare program is insurance companies did not want to insure seniors at an affordable price. Mm-hmm. So we have Medicare. Now we're going to go back in time and depend on this voucher, which will not keep up with the health care inflation, and it will cost seniors more and more every year out of their pockets. I call it coupon care. You're going to get a coupon, and you'll be told good luck. I'm not even sure about the good luck part, but that's the plan.
Our last caller is from Michigan City, Indiana. Nancy, good morning, a recipient of Social Security.
Yes, good morning. I wrote payroll checks, and when people are working at minimum wage, the 30 cents might be going out to Medicare and 25 cents out to Social Security, and by the time they retire, like the one lady, your check is maybe $700-800 a month. I think what we need to do is raise minimum wage, bring back our unions, our good jobs, so our payroll payments are larger.
Well, I have no issue with that comment whatsoever. Steve, if I could just make one other comment on the budget, that is, well, actually two. Medicaid, as I mentioned, some of the callers have talked about the high cost of nursing home care. Without Medicaid, those people would not be able to be in a nursing home. And as I said, 62% of nursing home care is covered by the Medicaid program, by middle-class citizens who maybe they have $157,000, but it's gone in a year and a half, nursing home care, and then they need the Medicaid program to survive. And finally, one of the really troubling things in the president's budget are things that are not going to get a lot of attention, and I hope I can get a little more attention paid to them here this morning. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, the acronym is LIHEAP. It provides assistance for people who need to stay warm in the winter. Over 7 million households get help through that program. A third of them are over 60 years old. It's eliminated in the president's budget. The program that provides counseling for Medicare beneficiaries so they can navigate the complexities of the Medicare program when they become eligible. It's the SHIP program, not SHIP, but the SHIP program, State Health Insurance Help. The money for that is eliminated. And finally, even though Social Security has a dedicated revenue stream, all the money that's paid in goes to Social Security benefits, and on top of that, the cost of running the program itself. All those offices all over the country, all those employees that help people figure out what their benefits are, that is going to be, in this budget, cut substantially. $90 million is going to be cut out of the budget of the Social Security program. It's going to mean longer lines, abbreviated office hours. You're going to have to be on hold forever if you want to talk to somebody. You have to wait now if you file a disability claim for over a year for a hearing. There's a woman in Philadelphia that I read about a few weeks ago, has waited 744 days for a hearing. You're going to wait even longer. Why are we doing this, especially since the actual cost of running the program also comes out of the payroll tax? It's less than 1% of the program, but it's paid for. This money is in the bank, paid for by wage earners, and they're entitled to have good service from the Social Security program.
We hope you'll come back again. Our guest, Max Richtman, he's the president and CEO of an organization known as the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We appreciate your time and insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.